Welcome to the Construction Leading Edge, the podcast dedicated to helping construction professionals become better entrepreneurs and leaders. Now, let's get started. Welcome everyone to another episode of the Construction Leading Edge, the site and podcast dedicated to helping construction professionals become more effective entrepreneurs and leaders. My name is Todd DeWalt, and I will be your host and guide through this process today. Today we're going to tackle the topic of how to lead your team through a time of organizational change. This could be a time of significant growth in your business, could be a time of downsizing, maybe going through a layoff or perhaps an acquisition, a sale of the business, change in some key personnel, starting up a new business line, you name it, anything that happens in your business that involves some significant organizational change. We're going to talk about that. This is something that I've gone through just recently over the past few months, and some of these things I wish I had known beforehand, but I've learned a few the hard way. So we're going to talk about 7 keys to leading your team through a time of organizational change. So let's go ahead and get started. Number 1 is to communicate beyond your comfort zone. So number 1 is to communicate beyond your comfort zone. Communication's key because in a vacuum of information, people tend to develop their own narrative. You've probably been in situations where you weren't sure what was going on, you weren't getting good information, you weren't getting good feedback from other folks on the team, so you begin to develop your own storyline. Speculation kicks in, imagination takes the front seat, and before you know it, you've got this wild storyline of what's going on. And frankly, nobody else is much different than that. In a vacuum of information, people develop their own narrative, so they need to know something. So as a leader, the best thing you can do for your team is communicate with them as much as possible. Don't feel like you have to have all the answers. Sometimes what I've found is people want to know what you know. Sometimes it's what you're telling them is something like, I don't know exactly what's going on, but here's what I know. This is what I can tell you. So again, don't feel like you have to have all the answers. Don't make stuff up. Don't sugarcoat it. Don't try to tell people what you think they want to hear. Just be straight up with them. Tell them what you know, and tell them what you don't know. Tell them if you don't know something, tell them that too. Just be upfront. The other thing is to get comfortable asking questions as you go through a change. If there's some significant organizational change, you need to get feedback from all different levels of your team. You need to ask questions of people up and down the organizational chart, like, what are your concerns? How does this affect you? What do we need to watch out for as we go through this? You would be amazed at the feedback you're going to get from especially the frontline people as you try to implement a new process, a new business line, go through some key organizational change. So don't feel like just because you're the leader that you have to protect the people on your team from making any decisions or giving any feedback. Leverage their experience, leverage the frontline folks. They've got some great information, and they can make this process go a lot smoother. Lastly, don't make commitments that you can't deliver on. Don't make commitments on things that are outside of your control. If you don't know what's going to happen, then you need to tell people, hey, I don't know what's going to happen. What I like to say is, here's what I can tell you. Here's what I know. Beyond that, I don't know. I'm not going to make promises about what may happen, what may not happen, and people will appreciate your directness. They'll appreciate that you're being candid with them. So that's number 1, to communicate beyond your comfort zone. Number 2 is, in this process of change, be sure to explain the why. Sometimes we get so stuck on the tactical or the strategic and the day-to-day, this is what we're doing, this is how we're going to do it, that we fail to explain the why. And research has shown that people will embrace new initiatives, they'll embrace change much more if they understand the why behind it. So explain the benefits to this change. Explain why the old system didn't work, or explain why the status quo was a problem, and cast some vision for them to see how this could potentially help them. Now, frankly, there's going to be some changes that don't help those people. If it's a layoff, then it's not necessarily going to help them, but they will respect you as the leader more if you'll explain the why. If it's a financial issue, tell them it's a financial issue. If it's whatever it is, just tell them what you know, but explain the why, not so much the how or the when or the who or the what, but explain the why. So number 3, keep the focus on the big picture and the future. Again, number 3 is to keep the focus on the big picture and the future. I think a good rule of thumb would be to spend 80% of your time talking about looking toward the future and no more than 20% of the time looking back toward the past. Don't spend much time looking back at the way things used to be, who used to be in the previous role, how things used to go, because frankly, that's not useful, it's not productive, and it's not going to get anybody anywhere. So you will need to spend a little bit of time looking backwards. It's not all bad, but I think a good rule of thumb would be to spend no more than 20% of your time looking backwards. And also, this is a good opportunity to cast some vision and look at the big picture. If you're in a relatively large organization, it's pretty easy for people to get stuck down in the weeds and not know how what they're doing impacts the rest of the organization. So step back, show them how this change affects them, and then how this change will be better for the organization. So focus on the big picture. The 4th key in leading your team through a time of organizational change is to provide safety and protection. Part of your job as a leader is to provide safety for the folks on your team. They need to know that it's going to be okay. They need to know that you have their back, that you're going to back them up, that you're not going to let anything happen to them without letting them know. Let them know that there won't be any surprises. They need to trust that you have their best interests in mind. I had a situation recently as part of this organizational change that I went through where some folks were concerned, some guys who were doing good work were concerned that they were going to get fired for no reason. And I caught wind of that. I found out that they were looking around for other jobs, starting to put applications in. They were concerned that they were going to get fired, and it was not warranted at all. So I just gave them a call and said, hey, this is what I can tell you. I've got your back. As long as you keep doing good work, you don't have anything to worry about with your job. I'll go to bat for you. I'll protect you from this other situation, and you don't have to worry about it. And they appreciated that a lot. Because to know that somebody else had their back was a tremendous benefit to them. And I'm sure I would feel the same way. I've been in that situation, actually, where I had some passive-aggressive, narcissistic guy in upper management that I felt like out to get me, and my manager said, hey, we'll go to bat for you, we've got your back, you don't have to worry about anything. And that allowed me to focus on getting back to work, doing what I needed to do, and not be concerned about this guy who was trying to cause trouble for me. So provide safety and protection for your people, because that's what's going on in their minds. If they think their job is in jeopardy, then that means that potentially their family's livelihood is in jeopardy. And that's not where people need to be. Those people who are concerned about their job, their livelihood, their income, their family, and their ability to provide for their family, if they're worried about that stuff, they are not productive. So they need to know that you've got their back. So provide safety and protection for your folks. Next, aside from safety and protection, your job as a leader, this is number 5, is to provide clarity. One of the key jobs of leaders is in times of chaos and change is to provide clarity. You need to keep the team focused. Keep the main thing the main thing. Just a good analogy would be when when a ship is going through a storm, that's the time for somebody to really hold on to the wheel. Somebody needs to have a tight grip on the wheel or the rudder during stormy weather, more so than when things are calm. So the time for you to really step up and provide clarity and help keep the team focused is when there's a change going on. Because, again, going back up to item number 1, we talked about how people develop their own narrative. If someone's not telling them what to focus on and providing that clarity, then your team is going to be all over the dance floor. Some will be figuring out where they need to go work next. Some will be developing conspiracy theories. Others will be trying to sabotage other teams. So provide clarity, keep your team focused, and and let them know you're going to get through this. Let them know that we're going to get through this together. You have their back, keep them focused, get the job done, and keep moving no matter what's going on around them on the outside. The 6th key is to expect resistance and expect that you're going to have some obstacles as you go through this change. You might as well plan for it. The reason people get depressed and disappointed when they go through these processes is that they think it's just going to go smoothly and they did not expect obstacles. So you might as well prepare for it. Anytime you go through change, you're going to run into some obstacles. Woodrow Wilson was quoted as saying, "If you want to make enemies, try to change something." And that's very accurate even in business today. Seth Godin has an interesting concept. He wrote a book called The Dip. And if you were to draw a chart, imagine drawing a chart where the horizontal axis is time and the vertical axis is, let's call it, energy or excitement. You start a project, let's use, for example, let's say there's a new process. You're going to implement a new process on your team where you're changing the way you handle reporting from the job sites, for example. So this is your baby. You're going to roll this initiative out. So you start out high on the excitement axis. So you're at like 90%. You're a 9 on a scale of 1 to 10 in excitement on day 1. This thing is going to change the world. People are going to love it. You're excited. You're confident that everybody's going to embrace it. It's going to go smoothly, no problems. You start off at a 9, and then as time goes on, you go through what Seth Godin calls the dip. 2 weeks later, your excitement level is a 1, and you're down in this low point. People don't like it. People don't see the benefit in it. People are ignoring you. It's just not going well, and you are in a funk. That's the dip. So Seth Godin says you need to expect the dip. Anytime you're doing anything significant, expect the dip. And in fact, here's a quote from Seth Godin. He says, "The dip is a filter. It's that barrier that separates the well-meaning amateurs from the professionals. The dip is the dividing line between average and the best in the world. When you start a project, it's fun and you get a lot of support. When you break through the dip, you're seen as the one, the only, the go-to person. In between is the dip." So what Seth Godin says is expect the dip. Anytime you do something significant, expect the dip, plan for the dip, prepare for the dip, and know that on the other side of this dip is when you will really shine as a leader. As he said, when you break through the dip, you're seen as the go-to person. So plan for it, be ready for it, and make it happen. The 7th key and final key to leading your team through organizational change is to engage. Stay engaged. As Seth Godin says, stick with it. The temptation is going to be when you start this initiative or you're trying to work through the organizational change and you run into resistance or obstacles, people who aren't supportive, the temptation is going to be just to disengage and say, screw it. I'm out. I'm done. I'm tired of this. I've got other stuff to do. And get to like 80% complete and then just drop the ball. So stay engaged. Keep your door open during times of change, during times of chaos. People need to know that you're available. Going back again to the conspiracy theories, if your door is closed and people aren't seeing you very much, then they're going to start developing these amazing conspiracy theories and start speculating about what's going on behind closed doors. Stay engaged or get engaged with people at all levels of your organization. Remember those frontline people who have good experience and good information that you need to communicate with? Stay engaged with those people. And as you're talking to them about this change, keep them plugged in and tell them, hey, we need your help. This is not something they need to understand, and they need to feel like this is not something you're trying to jam down their throat without any input from them. We need to say, hey, we need your help with this. This thing's not going to work without you. How can we do this? How can we make this work? Give us some suggestions. Can we count on you to help us make this thing work? So get these people engaged. Somebody who feels like they're part of the solution is much less likely to be part of the problem. They're much less likely to sabotage it if you're asking them for help and genuinely getting them engaged in the solution. Here's an interesting tactic that I think is pretty effective. That's what someone called finding the informal leaders in your organization. Again, find the informal leaders in your organization. These are the people who maybe they don't have the title necessarily of a leader. They're not an executive. They're not necessarily even in management. These are the people who are connected and well-liked and respected by lots of other people. These are what some people would call, what Malcolm Gladwell would call the maven. They distribute information, and people see them as a resource of information. Could be the well-respected field superintendent who's been around a long time, the guy that doesn't talk much, but everybody listens when he does talk. Could be the secretary who's been there for 25 years. She's been answering phones and filing papers and doing pay requests for 25 years. She's not necessarily in a position of leadership, but she is an informal leader. So find those informal leaders, the people who seem to have some stickiness, and leverage their experience. Ask them those questions. Hey, what can we do to make this thing work? Can I count on you to help? How's it going? Stay tuned in to how things are going through the process. How's it going? Be ready to change during this process of being engaged, because again, things could change. Ultimately, it's not the process that you use to get there. It's the end result that is the most important thing. And finally, stick with it until the end. If you've decided that this change is worthwhile, or your organization has decided that this is a worthwhile endeavor, then you need to stick with it until the end. Go through what Seth Godin calls the dip, get on the other side of it, and stick it out. And I guarantee that people will respect you when they see that you stuck with it. Your boss will see that you're a guy or a gal who can stick it out and make stuff happen, and the people on your team will see that you've gotten them involved, you've engaged them, you have communicated with them, you've protected them, you provide focus, and you've solved some problems and ultimately helped them be more successful. And I guarantee if you do that stuff, the people on your team will respect you, and you will be that go-to guy, as Seth Godin says. So that wraps it up. 7 keys to leading your team through an organizational change. Just to recap briefly, number 1, communicate beyond your comfort zone. Number 2, remember to explain the why. Number 3, keep the focus on the big picture and the future. Number 4, provide safety and protection to the people on your team. Number 5, provide clarity. Keep your team focused. Number 6, expect the resistance. Be ready for the dip. Number 7 is engage. Stay engaged, stay engaged, stay engaged, and stick it out until you get where you need to be. Hope this helps. If it does, please send me an email. I'd love to hear from you. You can hit me at todd@constructionleadingedge.com. You can also hit me on Twitter at conleadedge. Let me know what you think. Let me know if this helps. I hope it is helpful. These are things that I have used, tactics and strategies I've used to get through some recent changes, and some of these are really fresh on my mind. Hey, if you would, do me a favor, go to iTunes and leave a rating or a review. I want to get the word out to other folks. If this helps you, please leave a rating or review. I'd love to hear from you. And I hope this is helpful. I hope you are ready for change, because one thing that is certain in this day and age is change, and we need to be ready for it. Our teams are counting on us to lead them through change. Our customers are counting on us to help them manage change, and we're the ones for it. So until next time, have a great one. Bye-bye.